The latest New Yorker magazine cover went viral this past week for its very relatable portrayal of pandemic living. It's a drawing of a woman smiling into her laptop camera, apparently chatting on Zoom. She's got her hair done, her makeup done, her jewelry on, a nice top on. She's holding a drink up to the laptop screen, and there's a lamp angled to light her face just right. But beyond the view of her laptop camera, we see the rest of her reality. She's wearing slippers, she's wearing shorts, she's got her phone in her other hand where she can see it. Her floor and her desk are littered with takeout containers, hand sanitizer, surgical masks, Amazon boxes. There are dishes piled in her sink and clothes strewn about on her bed. It resonates. Many of us are living a kind of split life these days between the camera-ready version of our lives and the reality beyond the webcam lens. Turns out that when you aren't ever expecting in-person company, it's easy to let everything beyond the lens fall into disorder. Many of us have been living in a kind of flip side, a kind of upside down. We let the public into our private space now, but we've had to become more private when we actually go out in public. The line between public and private has been drastically altered by the pandemic. We have boundaries we never had before, while boundaries that used to be important to us have disappeared. We have now seen each other's pets and plants and kitchens and bookshelves and babies and toddlers, but we can't even get close enough to each other to shake hands or to hug. We can only show part of our faces. Our homes are our workplaces and our children's classrooms, as well as the place we do most of our shopping and socializing and dining. If we live with others, we are almost always with them without ever having the joy of coming home to them. If we live alone, we are almost always with only ourselves without ever having the joy of coming home to blessed solitude. And even as we have gotten somewhat used to living this way, it still feels unbalanced and unsettling and disorienting. We long for an end to it, for an end to the pandemic, a restoration of our economy and life as we once knew it, and a healing of our wounds, deep wounds, social and political, emotional, psychological, spiritual, relational. We are waiting. We are hoping. We are yearning for the big fix. Of course, we aren't the first to yearn like this. Our Gospels are written against the backdrop of longing for God's intervention in the world, of waiting for the Messiah to appear and fix things, set things right. Luke tells us at the beginning of his gospel that he has decided to write an orderly account of the events that have been fulfilled. and orderly account. But just beyond the frame of the story he tells is all the conflict and upheaval and disorder of life under the Roman Empire. The Jews in Palestine lived under the tyrannical rule of King Herod, who represented the brutal imperial power of Rome. Powerless against economic exploitation and systematic oppression, the Jews there continually faced a choice between compliance or resistance. A few individuals here and there could gain some form of limited economic or political power if they cooperated, if they were complicit in the brutality. But as a people, they had few choices. When rebellions sprang up here and there across the land, they were quickly crushed. In fact, not far from Nazareth, where Jesus grew up, an entire city was pillaged and burned, and its inhabitants killed or taken into slavery due to its rebellion against Rome. The Jews living under these cruel realities longed for an end to their powerlessness and suffering and upheaval. They hungered for justice. They dreamed of God's intervention, the fulfillment of God's promises to them, a Messiah to come and save them. They were yearning for the big fix. These are the realities just beyond the lens of Luke's story. It's where he starts the story, knowing that his audience will understand. He writes, in the days of King Herod of Judea. That's all he says there at the beginning about what's going on beyond, but it's enough. It's enough for his audience to know. For Luke, the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promises is shaped kind of like a funnel or like a narrowing of a lens. He starts big and moves smaller and smaller. He nods to the tyrant on the throne, the one who seems to have all the power. Before pulling the focus in, he moves from Herod to Zechariah, an elderly priest from an unnamed town in the hill country, visited by an angel while he performed his duties in the inner sanctuary of the temple, and struck mute after questioning that angel who brought the strange good news that Zechariah's barren, aging wife would have a baby. Now Luke pulls the focus in even smaller. It is not the priest, but his aging wife, who suddenly fills up our screen. She is a descendant of Aaron, the very first priest, and her name is Elizabeth. Elizabeth does conceive just as the angel said she would, and unlike her husband, who asked the angel for a sign, Elizabeth takes the pregnancy itself as a sign that God has taken away her disgrace. She hides herself for 5 months, a kind of self-isolation. When our quarantine ends, some of us may surprise our friends with our uncut hair and weight gain, but we've got nothing on old Elizabeth, who will emerge from her seclusion with a baby in her belly. Now, Luke draws the focus in even further, zooming in on an even less significant person, than the aging, childless wife of an obscure old priest. A young teenager, a girl of no social standing or economic means, engaged to be married. Her name is Mary. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, the angel appears to her young cousin, Mary, and tells her that she will have a baby. She will have the baby, the Holy One, the Son of God, the Messiah, the one they have all been waiting for. Before she can respond, the angel gives her the news that her cousin Elizabeth, who was said to be barren, has in her old age also conceived a son. The angel says, "For nothing will be impossible with God." Mary says, "Yes, let it be." And then she gets up and hurries off to the hill country to find Elizabeth. The meeting of these two women is a rare occurrence in our Gospels. We don't usually get to see two women as the sole focus, the very center of the story. But Luke wants us to see them. See them. He has started the story of Jesus with the briefest possible mention of the seemingly biggest power, King Herod on the throne over all of Judea. But now Luke has brought the focus all the way down and all the way in on two women talking. See them. See these two. Women in a world ruled by men. Jews in an empire ruled by Rome. Neither one of them of means or social standing. See them. The old body, the young one, too old, too young, too female. See them in a world longing for those with power to do the right thing, to fix the mess. What is Luke showing us about what power is and where it comes from? What does he want us to see about how God intervenes? What does he want us to watch for as we anxiously wait for the big fix? There is a visual depiction of this scene that captivates me like no other. In the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, Italy, tucked away on the 3rd floor in the 25th room of that floor, stands an altarpiece painted by Mariotto Albertinelli in 1503. It's considered to be his masterpiece. In the center of the painting, framed by a carved stone arch, stands a pair of women. The figures in the composition are life-size. On the left is the younger woman, draped in blue, looking as if she has just stepped into the frame, her left hand at her throat, her right hand extended in greeting, her head bent forward. On the right, the older woman leans close toward the younger. Her right hand holds that of the girl. Her left hand reaches, grasping the girl's shoulder. The older woman gives the impression of being stooped, but it is actually that she is leaning so far forward towards the girl that her whole body has curved in towards this greeting and towards this girl. She gazes up into the girl's face, her nose only about an inch from the younger woman's. It is one of the most intimate paintings I have ever seen. There seems to be a lot of movement in the painting, and there is some urgency in their meeting. If you look more closely, you will start to wonder what exactly you see on the faces of these two women. Is that the tiniest hint of a smile on Mary's face? Or do you see a bit of anxiety? Is that calm acceptance? And what is that look in Elizabeth's eyes? Is it encouragement, tenderness, concern, reverence? If you watch their faces long enough, you may begin to see their emotions shift back and forth. You begin to see different possibilities. There's a dynamism here, even all these centuries later, a hint that this is what real relationship, real visitation is. A give and take, a flexibility, a flow of energy, an encounter that can change us. Elizabeth leans forward to embrace her young cousin, a simple gesture of affection that in our own circumstances we no longer take for granted. And this, as you can see, is the whole focus of the painting. The architecture emphasizes it. A single arch echoing not only the shape of the altarpiece itself, but also the shape and movement of the two women bending towards each other. See, the symmetry and shapes within the painting show us what matters most. The embrace, the encounter, and specifically the older woman. See how she bends, how she greets, how she embraces, how she loves. And how often is it that it is an older woman, an older body at the very center of our interest? Albertinelli takes the scene to another level with intense and luminous color. You probably remember from elementary school that primary colors, red, blue, yellow, are pure, meaning you can't create them from other colors. And on a standard color wheel, between each primary color is a secondary color, orange, green, purple, formed when equal parts of two primary colors are combined. And maybe you remember that on that color wheel, when you pair a primary color with the secondary color directly across from it, they're considered complementary colors. They balance each other. They make each other appear brighter. They add energy to each other. If you know anything about color theory, then you can see it as soon as you've superimposed a standard color wheel on top of the scene. These two women are draped in complementary colors, communicating a beautiful balance and soothing harmony, even as they add to the sense of movement. Elizabeth in soft secondary colors, and Mary in clear primary ones. This hints that the older woman knows the greatness of the younger one. The colors of their clothing are placed in the exact order as they appear on the color wheel. What does this alignment tell us? Especially in contrast to the disorder and disarray in the world beyond the frame. As the colors swirl around each other, just as they do on the wheel, we sense again the movement in the scene. Is this an embrace or a dance? The child inside Elizabeth is dancing. Luke tells us that Mary's greeting causes Elizabeth's baby to leap inside her womb. And Elizabeth is filled with the Holy Spirit and shouts the truth that Mary hasn't even told her yet, and that Mary's body does not yet reveal. Mary is pregnant, and her baby is the one they've been waiting for. Luke's story begins with the briefest possible mention of the ruthless power on the throne before he draws our gaze down, narrows our focus, pulls it in, and has us pause here and consider these two women. They are expecting. They are expectant. They are filled with God's unpredictable power. They are pregnant with impossibility. This Luke wants us to see. This is where the transformation of the world begins. It begins with these two women, powerless and positionless and poor. It was not possible for them to fix the world. They were not the decision makers. They were the life bearers. They carried the secret. They carried the stunning good news inside their own bodies. They knew in their bodies what the world could not yet see or believe. This is how God intervenes in our disordered world. This is how God's transformation takes hold in mystery, in secret, in powerlessness, in relationships, in bodies, especially those we ignore or undervalue. God's transformation takes hold from within. It starts inside our mess, not against it. It starts from within our disorder, not from outside of it. The disorder of our own little lives, the dislocation, the disorientation. This is where God's good news begins. It begins in our emptiness. It begins in our emptiness, because how else can God fill us? How can God fill us? How can we be filled with God? How can God be born within us if there isn't any room? If we are already all filled up with our own sense of power and position and perfection and progress and plans. God's good news begins in our emptiness. God's good news begins in our mess, which is to say, how you are feeling right now, 9 months into a pandemic, with everything you're trying to manage, with your loneliness, your sadness, your anxiety, your heartache, your disorientation and disorder and disarray, your feeling of being spent or frazzled or done or empty. all of that, that is where God's impossible good news begins.